What's up, everybody? Welcome into another day here on this Apple River trial where self defense has been claimed in a trial that has a lot of different details, a lot of different eyewitnesses, a lot of different law enforcement officers' point of view. The most important and biggest piece of evidence is obviously a cell phone recording of the entire incident before the altercation, the words that were exchanged, the physical blows that were exchanged, and then obviously the fatal action that was taken by the defendant in this case with his pocket knife, resulting in the loss of life of one young person and multiple people injured. And he's been charged in that death and with those other injuries. And a lot of what the jury is going to have to determine is based on that cell phone recording, that video. Did he reasonably feel like he was in danger for his life? And the most of the trial so far has been from the eyewitnesses, the witnesses, the victims, the people that were there in the water, the defendant's ex-wife, what happened, who said what, who did what, could they have left, should they have left, what decisions were being made at the time and why, some of the physical ailments of the defendant that may add to why he may have been in fear. A lot of people there concerned because of how many, I think it was like 10, 11, 12 people and just the defendant by himself. All these people against the defendant. He was shoved, he was punched, he was pushed into the water. Maybe he was afraid of drowning. He was afraid of getting beat up, about getting jumped. But who started it? What did the defendant say? Did he antagonize or was he antagonized? Did he punch a female? That's a big part of this question. Did he start the fight by punching a female where some of the men jumped in to protect her and then it turned into an altercation that turned fatal? In the middle of the altercation, could he have walked away? There's no duty to retreat, but those are all things the jury's going to have to look at this video and try to determine. Well, today we started hearing from some law enforcement, and based on the state's opening statement, I kind of felt like the most damning evidence and the evidence that was going to hurt the defendant the most was, shocker, you may have guessed it based on some of our previous videos and previous cases, the defendant's own actions and statements. Because the state said in their opening that the defendant basically acted like he didn't know what happened. He tried to sneak on out of there in a group with a hat on and sunglasses. He didn't tell anybody he had a knife. He actually said he didn't have a knife. He acted like he did not know what happened. And we started to get into that evidence today. The evidence is still ongoing. So if there are some witnesses late in the afternoon, I may not have seen them yet. So they may be part of our next breakdown. We will eventually be going live on this trial to do some Q&A. It's always hard for me to go live during the trial because I know a lot of you are watching the trial live. And my night schedule has been kind of packed this week, so I haven't been able to go live at night, but we will make it happen either tomorrow on Friday or next week. We will be going live eventually on this trial to talk about it together and answer the questions you have. But the most important evidence to me is the defendant's post-altercation actions in a self-defense case. A lot of very legitimate self-defense cases happen. It's very unfortunate. I hate to see it when people get injured or killed, but sometimes it is necessary based on the situation they're presented with. But how they act immediately after is so important. Do they stay there? Do they tell the cops, I had no choice, I got jumped, I'm so sorry? Do they try to render aid? Do they explain immediately what happened? Or do they try to get out of there? Do they try to hide? Do they try to hide the weapon? Do they try to say it wasn't them? Because that to me shows a lot more consciousness of guilt in the way that you know it wasn't self-defense. Now, you might be wrong and you might not know what self-defense is, and you might be scared or you might be in shock. All those things are very real and plausible explanations for this, but I think from a jury's point of view, that is the best piece of evidence for the state to prove it wasn't self-defense. They've done a great job proving he's the one that dealt the fatal blows and that his actions caused the death. Those things are always pretty easy in these cases. But getting over the self-defense, showing that it was in fact intentional and not as a reaction because somebody else put him in danger with their actions. So we're just going to listen to one of the officers and listen to a couple little clips of the defendant on body cam, but there is more to come. The state is just scratching the surface with what the defendant said and did in today's testimony. One of the officers testified the knife was somewhere in a different location and they found it kind of in the mud, closed up. The defendant did not tell them where it was. He didn't still have it on him. He didn't give it to them like, hey, this is what I used. Really sucks that all this happened. So now let's kind of hear this officer discuss where the defendant and his group are walking, how the defendant was dressed, what the defendant said, and we're even going to see the defendant when he gets detained, what the look on his face is like, what his emotions are like, and what he says. There was some fight from the defense attorneys to try to not let this in because he wasn't read his Miranda rights. The state argued, well, it wasn't incriminating or questions that were seen to elicit any incriminating information. He just basically says, okay. And they're using it to show that he does have knowledge and he knows somebody was stabbed, yet he acts like he doesn't. So let's watch this testimony together.
The east side of the river underneath the walking bridge, which is accessible by vehicle by turning off a Main Street or Highway 35 to the south and following a trail.
Had you been given at that point a picture of what the suspect looked like?
Yes.
Do you recall, does you sit here today, what he was wearing in the photograph that you were given for the picture?
The initial description was a 50s something, white male, no shirt, swim trunks with a gold or a necklace chain. The picture was similar to that.
At the time that you arrived to the area, had the suspect been taken in custody yet?
No.
Because of that, did you use caution when you approached?
Yes.
Did you draw your firearm?
I did.
Explain what happened once you got to the Village Park area.
So I parked my squad, exited. I had my handgun drawn but pointed down. There was a group approaching me, walking on the footpath. What struck me as odd is one of the people in that group was wearing a long sleeve button up shirt, hat, and glasses. Didn't fit in with the rest of the group. I could see just a little bit of a...
He says that struck him as odd. Now on cross, you'll hear the defense say, well, here, this picture earlier in the day, he was wearing his hat. He was wearing his sunglasses. We've heard them ask other witnesses. He wears camo a lot. That's kind of his signature to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. And maybe it wasn't. But the description, of course, was shirtless, overweight, no hat, no sunglasses, had snorkels on at some point, gray beard. So you can imagine if the jury starts to think he's guilty and didn't do this in self-defense, this looks very bad. Was he trying to hide? Was he trying to sneak out so nobody would see him?
Necklace. I felt that was possibly the suspect that we were looking for. However, I knew a large portion of officers were coming down behind me. So I passed that group to make sure there wasn't, just to rule out that there wasn't anybody else that matched the description. And then behind me, I heard someone yell, that was the person.
Was the defendant...
Additionally, with all of this stuff on, he walks right by law enforcement. Again, he doesn't say, hey man, it was me. Hey, can we talk about this? You'll never guess what happened. Listen to this. I almost got killed today. I got jumped by a bunch of these young guys and I had to defend myself. Not that he has to do that, because that can go very wrong too. But he says nothing and tries to walk right by while he pretty obviously knows everybody's coming down there to investigate what just happened.
Part of that group that walked past you as you were going down?
Yes, he was the one wearing the button-up long sleeve shirt, hat, and sunglasses.
Did he make any attempt to flag you down or talk to you?
Nobody did. Nobody looked at me as I walked past with my gun drawn.
How many seconds after you walked past did someone else, some other law enforcement person, recognize him?
Probably within 5 to 10 seconds, because at that point it was a civilian with a baseball bat that yelled, that's the suspect, or that's the guy.
Did you see the civilian with the baseball bat?
Yes.
Did he attack the defendant in any fashion?
No, he just pointed at the subject.
So again, the defense wants to make sure, and they've talked to some people who did see and didn't see the baseball bat, that there were other people with weapons, other reasons he should be in fear for his life. I'm not sure that connection's really hitting for me personally. Maybe it is for you, but this cop confirms there was somebody else there with a baseball bat. And also, the defense is kind of, I think, trying to argue through questions that maybe people were chasing up into the woods where they thought the defendant went to try and go hunt him down, basically with baseball bats and other things like that.
At the time this happened, did you have a recollection of how many law enforcement personnel were in that general area at the Village Park? I mean,
everybody was still responding as the suspect was taken into custody. It was one of our deputies, Deputy Ben Trebian, and a Polk County deputy, and then I was standing there. So in the immediate area surrounding the person himself was 3 of us, but it was constantly people showing up. So I don't know a static number of the initially.
once he was strike that. Were you wearing a body cam that day?
Yes.
Was it recording your activities at Village Park?
Yes.
Did you at some point make contact with Mr. Mew after he had been arrested or detained?
Yes. After he was handcuffed, I escorted him to my squad, placed him in my squad, grabbed my transport belt, just knowing with the incident that this would be a timely process, and then switched out his handcuffs with a transport belt so his hands were handcuffed in front of his body instead of behind, and then placed him in the car. Yes.
Objection here, sidebar.
Aware that your body cam is located on a flash drive that our offices have been holding on to?
Yes.
I told you it was marked as Exhibit 9. Would that make sense to you?
Yes.
We're going to be playing a portion of your body cam from Exhibit 9. I'm not going to ask you questions about it. I'm not going to have you comment about it. We're just going to play it. Okay?
Okay.
And we're starting at the 2016 mark.
This is when they're putting him in the squad car. I'll slow it down so we can hear what they say.
So right now you're being placed under arrest, okay? You're being placed under arrest for homicide and attempted homicide.
Is that your body cam?
Yes.
That's your voice.
So they tell him, and it's just important for his knowledge. And facial expressions, doesn't look surprised. They talk about kind of how he was acting, emotionless, things like that. I think a jury is going to dig into that and see what does that make them feel as far as was this guy in fear for his life and really just reacted and this is what happened?
Voice in the background.
Correct.
After informing Mr. Mew what he was charged with, nothing further, Judge. Mr. Nelson?
After informing him what he charged, nothing further, Judge. Now cross.
Mr. Thomason. Morning.
Morning.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your arrival at the Village Park where the exit is there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You observed, let me, can I get that exhibit one time again?
One time.
Yes, please. 11 maybe? That's when you were on in that picture, correct?
Correct.
You didn't have a hat on in that picture, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 110, and it's been published before, okay? I want to ask you some questions about that. Permission to publish that? You've seen this photo before, sir?
I don't think so.
And I know that, Elmo, there's a bit of a glare. Are you able to see it, or you want me to give it to you in your hand?
That's fine.
And they're showing that he didn't just put that hat and glasses and shirt on to flee and try to hide himself, but that's in fact how he showed up that day or how he was dressed at other parts that day. That's why they're showing these pictures now.
Do you see to the left there a person you now recognize as Nikolai Mew?
Yes.
He's in that photo wearing the shirt that he was wearing when you arrested him.
Yes.
He's wearing the necklace that he was wearing when you arrested him.
Well, without confirming it, but it appears to be the same. Yes.
He's wearing a necklace.
Yes.
He's wearing sunglasses. Agreed.
Yes.
He's wearing a hat. Agreed.
Yes.
And I think you can even see like the sandals. Agreed.
Mine is cut off on the bottom, but
Miss, you see there just on the bottom that you saw him wearing when you saw him walking up from the river. Is that right?
in a different manner, but yes.
The shirt was buttoned up, correct?
Yes.
But other than that, it's the same clothing, correct?
Yes, that appears.
And obviously, he has a different expression on his face at the beginning of the trip than he does at the end of the trip, right?
Correct.
You, when you're approaching back to the Village Park where the exit is, okay? When you approach there, you said you drew your gun out, correct?
Yes.
Obviously, that's for lots of reasons, but particularly safety. Agreed?
Yes.
Your safety first, correct?
Yes.
And then the safety of everybody else around there, correct?
Yes.
Whether they be victims, witnesses, suspects, citizens, you're concerned about everybody's safety, correct?
Yes.
And that's why at that point, even though there's not an immediate threat to you, you have your weapon out, correct?
Yes.
That's what you've been trained to do sometimes, correct?
Yes.
Be prepared, correct?
Yes.
Did you in that moment, you had information, correct?
Yes.
Did you have a particular fear, or is this just in that instance, were you fearful? Is that why you drew out your weapon?
If I understand correctly, I wasn't responding to how I felt being in danger. I was responding to what the information I was given and to conduct my job properly.
There might be danger. The safest thing to do here is to have my gun drawn.
Yes.
And when it was drawn, again, I'm just trying to gather the facts, not being critical. Do you understand that?
Mhm.
How, when you draw it, do you know, we've all watched shows, and so sometimes I see somebody pointing a firearm. Sometimes I see them holding it down by their side. Sometimes it's with one hand. Sometimes it's with two hands. As you come down and you make visual assessment that Mr. Mew is there, you don't know at the time that he's Mr. Mew, but now we do. I want to ask about how you're holding the gun then. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can you tell us that?
Yes. It was pointed down towards the ground.
Okay. One hand, two hands?
One hand.
And then as you had it one hand down towards the ground, you're walking past people, correct?
Yes.
And one of those people that you walk past is Mr. Mew, correct?
Yes.
And about how far are you? 1 foot, 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet?
I'd say within, let's call it 8 to 10 feet.
Okay. And do you see him standing, walking, jogging, running? What do you see him doing?
So the group that he was with, there was maybe 1 or 2 people between
Again,
him.
always try to think of the purpose of a question when you hear a lawyer ask a question, and then you can usually figure out where they're trying to go. So they're saying he wasn't sprinting away. He wasn't ducking and hiding. He walked right by you. He walked. He didn't run. He wasn't doing anything nefarious. He was just leaving. It's weird to think that you could just do that and then leave. I guess they could argue he didn't know the magnitude at which all of this happened. But again, the state's doing a good job of explaining the commotion, and a lot of the post altercation videos show the commotion. So it's really hard to believe that his whole group and he didn't know what was going on. We know they couldn't get into the discussions between him and his wife yesterday, or his ex-wife, wife at the time, because of the spousal privilege. So, you know, they're trying to act like, oh, they didn't even know a big deal or there was any commotion going on, which is kind of wild to think about.
Him and I, but they're all walking straight from where I came from, past me, and all looking straight ahead.
Okay.
I look at them, see him, and then I'm scanning the area.
So Mr. Mew was with other people and they were all walking at the same pace, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say it would just be a normal human walking pace?
Yes.
You, when you walk past, your thoughts are, that might be the guy, correct?
Yes. Similar.
But you also knew that other law enforcement was coming, correct?
Yes.
And in that moment, you made the choice, not critical again, just you made the choice to say, I'm going to keep walking to see if the guy might be down the river, and we'll let the next group of law enforcement deal with this person that might be the guy. Fair to say?
Yes. So my decision was predicated purely on the fact that I knew more officers were arriving.
Yes.
If I knew I was down there by myself, what I believed him to be more than likely the suspect, I would have taken him into custody right away.
Sure. Or I imagine if you believed that he was in that moment posing some sort of immediate danger, you'd address that, correct?
Correct.
But for what you were like, that might be the guy, your danger assessment wasn't heightened based upon your observations of him, correct?
I was not being attacked or threatened to be attacked. I think that's what you mean.
Just, you didn't find a reason at that point to say, even if I think that's the guy, I need to address him right now, right? I'm imagining that's because you're like in that moment, even if he's the guy, you didn't think he was so dangerous that you needed to address him.
Well, based on what we were told, there's the danger of what was reported.
Absolutely.
But I also need to make sure that I don't mistake somebody else and get ambushed or miss a potential another suspect. So that's why I was looking just to double check. If that makes sense.
It doesn't, but I'm not a law enforcement officer and it doesn't
Okay.
need to. So I appreciate that. There's lots of factors that you're considering, correct?
Yes.
In whatever reason, in that moment, you decided to walk past him and let the next group of officers deal with him, correct?
Yes.
And then they did deal with him, correct?
Yes.
And then you turned around and observed that, correct?
I turned around and assisted.
And by the time you turned around to assist, they were dealing with it, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Mew was not running away, correct?
Correct.
He was cooperating, right?
Yes.
Well, from what you saw, he complied, correct?
Correct.
And at some point, you
And this is a good indication of like, this is the defense attorney's trying to, again, make it seem like he's not running, he's not being a jerk, he's not high, he's not doing all this stuff. But it's still hard and doesn't really explain why he left the scene, why he did nothing to help the investigation or help make sure they got medical treatment or call 911 when he figured out this happened and, whatever it may be. And I realized some bells are going to go off. Some people said, well, these people just tried to attack him. He was afraid for his life. He definitely doesn't necessarily look like that to me. Again, just to me, if I'm a juror here, doesn't look like that when he's leaving. And again, I get not talking to the cops. Obviously, that would be my advice. But staying there and saying it was self-defense, they attacked me, whatever it may be, or say, I need a lawyer, and, just tell them this is self-defense, whatever, something like that. Totally appropriate, would have made sense, as opposed to acting like he had no clue what was going on. Acting like, he absolutely didn't have a knife. And how it is the best evidence for the state is in the defense's, throughout their case, they're basically going to argue, oh, it wasn't the right thing to do to lie. I wish he wouldn't have lied. It was a mistake. He shouldn't have lied. That's how it's bad. They really have no explanation. They're nibbling around the edges of some of the issues of him trying to get out of there without anybody noticing and not having the weapon on him anymore. But that's going to be pretty big evidence that if I was the state, I would hammer on and focus on.
Decided, you saw that he was cuffed with his hands behind his back, correct?
Yes.
That can be an uncomfortable position for some people. Agreed?
Yes.
And because of that, you were like, this might be a long time. I'm going to go get, what do you call it, a belt?
Transport belt.
What is that?
It's a name for it, but it's a Velcro belt, has a D-ring in the front. So then the handcuffs go through the D-ring. So basically for any extended period of time that someone's restrained, their hands can be in front of them, but then they're secured to their belt line. So if someone wanted to resist or try to do something, their hands are locked at their waist, but it's more comfortable position for a longer duration.
And you knew essentially he was going to be placed inside of a squad car where he would be sitting down, correct?
Yes.
And sitting down with your hands cupped behind your back can be painful, correct?
Yes.
So that was the purpose, and you're putting him in this belt is for safety and comfort, right?
Safety and then comfort, just knowing that the investigation might be lengthy.
Sure. And I'm not critical of your considering both. I just want to make sure that it's not just safety. Agreed?
Correct.
It was an additional, you're wearing these things out and saying, I got to do this, got to make sure that he's comfortable and can sit there that long, correct?
Yes.
During that time, when you go get your belt, you come back, you're up close with Mr. Mew, is that right? You assist with putting the transport belt on him?
Yes.
You're like in his personal space, correct?
Yep. Correct.
And in that time, he doesn't do anything to you, correct?
No.
You agree?
Yes. Correct. He did not do
It
anything.
was a poor question on my fault. And because of your job, you have to be essentially in his personal space, right?
Yes.
And when you were in his personal space in that setting, I'm sure you're trying to both keep everybody safe, right?
Yes.
And as part of that, you want to make sure that the person whose space you're in is comfortable, correct?
It's one of the considerations.
Yeah, you don't want to get in somebody's personal space without kind of making sure it's safe for everybody, right?
Yes.
And part of that is
And again, they're projecting here when you get in people's personal space and it's dangerous and they feel threatened and what are they supposed to do? And it doesn't really take much and you don't want to do that. Again, all with the angle of self-defense.
you're making that person feel safe even though you're in their space.
Correct.
And you did that, right?
I believe so.
And you were safe, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Mew didn't do anything to you, agreed?
He did not.
And when you're in that space, you have an opportunity to make observations of him, correct?
Yes.
Including to smell.
And now they transition into you were in his personal space. You were so close to him. Did you smell alcohol? Did he seem like he was on drugs? Was he belligerent? Things like that. Because I feel like we've gotten a good enough admission from a lot of the victims and other witnesses there that they were drinking, smoking, whatever it may be. And they're going to get confirmation. And they did it throughout the day today. Basically, every law enforcement officer that came into contact with Mr. Mew said he was not drunk. They didn't smell it, didn't seem belligerent, didn't seem drunk to them, which I think is obviously a point in their column. And there is a lot to work with here on the defense side, but there are certain things that are so difficult to overcome. And I think we started scratching the surface of those today.
To make observations of him, correct?
Yes.
Including to smell, correct?
I can. Yes.
Yeah. Because sometimes in cases you've involved investigation involving matters of alcohol, correct?
Yes.
And one of the things that you can use is your nose to smell if it seems like somebody was consuming alcohol in some way, correct?
Yes.
And if you gather that information, you document it in some way, correct?
Yes.
And you might pass it on to another person, correct?
Yes.
And you might do further testing, correct?
Yes.
You didn't document, pass it on, or do further testing regarding Mr. Mew's alcohol use, agreed?
I did not know.
And the reason you didn't is you had no reason in that moment to suspect that he was somehow intoxicated, right?
Yes, and it was also not a detail that I was concerned about or part of something that I would have been a part of at that point.
Sure. I mean, if you smelled it, you would have noted it, remembered it, told somebody, right?
Yes,
So what we can gather from you're not noting it, telling anybody is you didn't smell it.
correct.
During that process, there's also you gained information about there's a citizen out there with a baseball bat. Is that right?
Yes,
And this is the citizen that essentially pointed out Mr. Mew to law enforcement, right?
yes.
And do you know if that citizen, we understand he wasn't attacked. I'm not trying to imply that. Do you know where that citizen was in relation to Mr. Mew?
His group hadn't approached that citizen, but they were walking in towards that direction of where the citizen was. But that citizen was also near law enforcement as well.
Was that citizen approaching Mr. Mew?
I heard him yell. When I turned, he was just standing and pointing. And then I was only probably 20 feet away.
Did you come to learn that that citizen's name is Carl Schilling?
I never spoke to the citizen or identified him. Somebody else did. So I don't know who he was identified as.
Okay. There was information exchanged between amongst law enforcement in the presence of Mr. Mew about this guy with a baseball bat. Is that right?
I guess I don't know.
Okay. There's on your body cam, there's a time when I think we hear you and others talking about the baseball bat while Mr. Mew is right there. Make sense?
Okay.
Let me just play that. All right. I think it is exhibit 9 at the. Mark working. Can you press play and then I'm going to ask you some questions about this.
Bear in mind, lunch is here, so.
I got, okay. I'm pressing pause because I didn't have the volume on. Pressing play.
The guy with the baseball bat was just responding to the sighting. Yep.
I just played from about 2:47 to 3:05. That was your body cam?
Yes.
And that was you again doing the transport belt on Mr. Mew?
Yes, I was securing the handcuffs.
And that was Mr. Mew looking around, correct?
Yes.
While the police were talking about the guy with the baseball bat.
Yes.
That's all.
Can I say anything else? All right. Thank you, Lieutenant. You are free to go. We're going to break for lunch.
So a couple other things I want to show, and some of this came in, some of it didn't with the rest of this body cam. But I thought it was interesting just to give us an idea of kind of what it was like that day at the scene. So we're going to watch some of this together as well.
D6 dispatch, believe we have the suspect detained. Believe we have him detained at the scene.
No weapons or anything like that.
Number 36 has a possible suspect detained at 1649. Everybody hold where they're at. We need a photo so we can confirm this. I got it. I'm coming up on the cross bridge right now. I got a photo on my phone. I'll be there in a second.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Nick.
Nick what?
Nick Mew.
Okay.
Why? What did he do?
This way.
People in his group asking, what did he do? Again, maybe he didn't tell them.
All right, we'll worry about it over here.
And again, it's going to be really hard to come back from not saying anything is one thing. Just exercising your right to remain silent, asking for a lawyer, whatever. I will never condemn somebody for that. That makes sense to me. They can't read anything into it. You can't give, if you don't say anything, you can't give an alternative explanation for the events that a video proves you're lying or try to cover something up, hiding your knife, saying you don't have a knife, whatever it may be. Whenever you say something and lie, and you tell the big lie, like happened to Alec Murdaugh and so many other cases, that can be enough to sink you all on its own. Jurors start to think, why lie about that? If you did something in self-defense, why lie about that? Why lie about this? Now, if you don't say anything, you don't lie, and they can't accuse you of lying. They can't use your right to remain silent against you. That's the point of the right. But when you start lying, it's the worst thing you can do when the jury has your own words to condemn you with. Sorry for the Sorry for the sound. I mean, there's just like all sorts of sounds going on the body cam footage. So get your ears ready.
Silver blockchain. Same shorts.
And right now they're kind of comparing him with the pictures that they have to make sure it's the right guy.
Yes. So, let me double lock this quick. The same as well. Got some pretty good markings on his hand too. All right.
They confirm he's got markings on his hands. They take pictures of those as well. Those were entered into evidence. All right, so here's some more statements that he makes that eventually make it into the trial.
Okay.
What's going
Temperature? Temperature's okay in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody, I hear somebody got stabbed,
Um,
and I fit the description.
yes, you do.
All right.
Yep. So we're working through that now.
Very strange, right? I hear someone's been stabbed and I fit the description with kind of a blank look on his face. Very strange, right? And something the jury gets to see him explain. What does that make you think? What's just your gut reaction when you see that or hear that? Because the jury is going to go so much on these videos, regardless of what everybody says they see or heard, or experts or testimony or arguments made by lawyers. The jury is going to trust their own eyes. The research shows the jury's eyes and ears they trust over everything, even if it's, radiology reports and there's something that we're trying to show with an expert, they look at with their own eyes, their own brains, and they try to figure out what do they see. So that's why this video evidence is so important. The defendant's own words are so important.
Okay in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody, I hear somebody got stabbed, and I fit the description.
Yes, you do.
All right.
Yep. So we're working through that now.
And that's it. All right. It's wild. And I think that as the state continues to really dig into the defendant's own words and more lies that I think he tells as time continues, this is going to be the hardest thing for the defense to overcome, because I think they have a lot of good arguments with how many people, how fit they were, how not fit the defendant was. He didn't really have a lot of places to go. They could have chased him. I understand why he was in fear. He was hit, pushed, punched, whatever it may be. Water there, it adds danger to the element. And so, I think they have a lot to work with there with that scenario and with that video, and especially with the stills of the video that they showed in their opening. But man, it's going to be very hard to get over how the defendant acted after the fact. So where do you guys sit as we sit here today? Where are you leaning? What questions do you still have to maybe see this as self-defense? What questions do you still have to get to the actual guilty verdicts? That's what we're going to continue to discuss. We're going to continue to break this down. Eventually, we're going to do a live, and I can't wait for that to answer all of your questions. You guys are sending me tons of questions about, the interaction between the defense team and the defendant himself. Not a lot of interaction. It depends on the personality of the defendant. Sometimes people want to be really involved. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people are so nervous they don't even want to talk about it. Sometimes people are so depressed and resigned to the fact that they think they're going to lose, so they don't want to talk about it. Some people are superstitious and they don't want to talk during the trial, or they don't want the jury to look at them and say, oh, they're talking too much or not talking enough or whatever it may be. And so they want to try to stay stoic so the jury can't use any of their facial expressions or anything like that against them. So it really depends on the defendant. But I know when you have the defendant's own words and actions, that is the best evidence against them if you're the state. So I think these are big pieces that are coming in now that the jury's going to have to deal with. I appreciate you guys joining me on here as always. Till next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.